Ghost was always 10 steps ahead. He planned every move, every lie, every alibi. So how did this happen? Asterisk in a world where one wrong decision can get you killed. How did the smartest man in the room miss the most obvious thing? James St. Patrick, better known as Ghost, wasn't just a drug dealer. He was a strategist, a businessman, a family man, and sometimes a killer. But more than anything, Ghost was a master at controlling everything and everyone around him. When you watched him walk into a room, you knew he was already thinking about how to get out. He was the kind of character who could make you root for the bad guy because everything he did seemed to have a purpose. He wasn't reckless like Keenan. He wasn't wild like Tommy. Ghost was all about control. Asterisk from the first episode of Power, we're told this man is trying to leave the drug game behind and go legit. He wants out. He wants a better life for his kids, and he wants to run a clean business, his nightclub, Truth. But the world he's in won't let him go that easily. Every time he tries to take a step forward, something or someone pulls him back. But even then, he always manages to stay one step ahead. That's what made watching him so interesting. You wanted to see how far he could go before it all caught up to him. Asterisk, and the truth is, Ghost did some really smart things. He covered his tracks like a pro. When someone was a threat, they disappeared. When the cops got too close, he manipulated the evidence. He played both sides, the criminal world and the legit one, and for a long time, it worked. He was a ghost in the system, almost untouchable. Asterisk, but here's where it gets interesting. For a show so focused on logic, planning, and outsmarting the enemy, there's a moment, a huge one, where all that just disappears. A moment where Ghost acts completely out of character, and not in a way that shows growth or failure, but in a way that just doesn't make sense. A moment that makes you stop and ask, wait, did the writers forget who Ghost is supposed to be? Asterisk, before we get to that moment, the biggest plot hole. In Power, we need to understand what made Ghost different from everyone else in the show, because without that, the flaw wouldn't hit as hard. So let's talk about what made his character so sharp, and why this mistake is so noticeable. Asterisk, Ghost's whole life was built on hiding. Hiding the drugs, hiding the money, hiding the truth from his wife, his kids, and the police. But he wasn't sloppy. He had layers of protection. He used people as pawns. He made sure his name was never directly connected to anything. Even his enemies respected him because of how careful he was. He didn't just sell drugs, he built an empire and protected it like a CEO. Asterisk, remember how he handled Rala in season 1. He thought Rala betrayed him, and even though they were close, Ghost put a bullet in him to keep his operation clean. Cold, but calculated. Then in later seasons, he constantly kept secrets from Tommy and Tasha, not because he didn't trust them, but because too many people knowing the plan made things messy. Ghost believed in control above all else. That was his entire identity. Asterisk, that's why the plot hole we're about to talk about isn't just a small writing error. It's something that breaks the very rules of who Ghost is. It's like watching Batman suddenly forget how to fight, or Sherlock Holmes missing an obvious clue. When a character is built to be smart, you can't have them make dumb mistakes unless the story earns it, and in this case, it didn't single quotes t. Asterisk. So when you realize what Ghost missed and what it cost him, you'll see why this one moment stands out in a series full of double crosses and danger. It's not just that the plot hole exists, it's who it happens to that makes it so jarring. This wasn't some random corner boy messing up. This was Ghost, the man with a plan, the king of cover-ups, and somehow he let something slip that should have never been overlooked. Asterisk, in the next section, we'll break down that exact moment, the scene, the setup, and the mistake that shook the foundation of Power. Stick with me, because once we peel back the Layers, you'll see this wasn't just a writing error. It was a full-on character betrayal. Ghost is a man who built an empire off of paranoia. He trusted no one, he watched every move, planned every conversation, and always kept an escape route ready. But somehow, he didn't see the threat standing right in front of him. The person he should have been most careful around. His own son, we're talking about Tariq. Now, let's rewind just a bit. By the time we get to season 6, Tariq has already lied, stolen, and betrayed his father multiple times. He ran drugs behind Ghost's back. He was influenced by Kanan. He helped set up Ray's murder. He was angry, resentful, and more than anything, he didn't trust Ghost anymore. That father-son bond was broken a long time ago. And yet, Ghost keeps treating Tariq like a child. Like someone who's just acting out instead of becoming a real threat. That's the plot hole. Ghost, the man who saw through everyone's lies, couldn't see that his own son was ready to kill him. Think about it. This is the same Ghost who figured out Lobos was manipulating people from behind bars. The same Ghost who took out threats before they became a problem. But when it came to Tariq, who had shown every red flag possible, Ghost just ignored the danger. There's a scene in episode 10 of season 6, right before Ghost gets shot, where he's talking to Tariq. It's tense. You can feel some things not right. Tariq accuses Ghost of turning on him. Ghost, as always, tries to control the situation with smooth words and fatherly advice. But you can see in Tariq's eyes, he's past that. He's not a boy anymore. He's made up his mind, and Ghost. He just keeps talking, calm, confident, like everything's under control. But it's not. This is where the writing stumbles. Because everything we know about Ghost tells us he should have picked up on the vibe. He should have noticed the shift in Tariq's tone, body language, attitude. Any criminal, especially one like Ghost, knows when someone's about to flip. He's seen it 100 times, so why didn't he see it now? There's no logical answer. The show tried to frame Ghost's death as poetic, killed by his own blood. Betrayed by the one person he tried to save, and emotionally, yes, it hits hard, but when you really think about it, it doesn't make sense for Ghost to let his guard down that much. Not with Tariq. Not after everything. He knew Tommy might turn on him. He knew Tessa couldn't be trusted, but he treats Tariq like he's just some kid who's mad at his dad, not a growing monster shaped by Ghost's own sins. That's not just careless. It's unrealistic. Especially for a man who was always 5 steps ahead. There were warning signs everywhere. Tariq was distant, secretive, aggressive. He had been sneaking around, working with people Ghost didn't approve of. He clearly idolized Kanan more than he ever respected Ghost. He even challenged Ghost to his face multiple times. And yet, Ghost still didn't think he needed to watch his back. That's the whole. This isn't just a he made a mistake moment. This is a he became a completely different person just to make the plot twist work moment. The writers wanted the shock. They wanted the betrayal. But they sacrificed Ghost's character in the process. And here's the thing. This plot hole actually damages the whole final arc of the show. Because if Ghost had seen the threat coming, like he always did, the ending might have been different. Maybe he could have stopped it. Maybe he would have left a message. Or set a trap. Or at the very least, been ready, but he wasn't. He just stood there, talking like a politician. Thinking he still had control. And that's what makes it unbelievable. Not that he died, but that he let it happen without a fight. That he never even saw it coming. This wasn't the Ghost we knew. This was a watered-down version of him, rewritten just to give us one last twist. And for a show that spent 6 seasons building a genius strategist, That's a hard pill to swallow, asterisk. Let's be clear, not every mistake a character makes is a plot hole. Sometimes a character does something stupid, and it actually makes sense, because it fits who they are. But that's the key, it has to fit. It has to be earned. When a character suddenly acts completely opposite to what the story has shown us for seasons, without a strong reason behind it. That's when you get a plot hole. Asterisk, and that's exactly what happened with Ghost and Tariq. Asterisk, here's why. Asterisk, Ghost is a character who survives by reading people. It's one of his main skills. He could walk into a room, feel the tension, and instantly know who was lying, who was hiding something, and who was plotting behind his back. That's how he stayed alive for so long. In a world full of snitches, killers, and crooked cops, Ghost didn't just survive, he thrived. And he did it by staying 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Asterisk, so when the writers expect us to believe that he didn't see Tariq coming, his own son, the one person he knew better than anyone, it just doesn't track. Asterisk, this isn't like Ghost trusted some random guy on the street. This is his son, the same son who, asterisk, lied to him multiple times about where he was and who he was with, asterisk, worked with Kanan. A known enemy, asterisk, got involved in Ray's murder and helped cover it up, asterisk, showed growing anger and distance for nearly 2 full seasons, asterisk, actively undermined his father's plans, both in the streets and in the family, asterisk, that's not just teenage rebellion. That's straight up criminal behavior. And more importantly, it's behavior Ghost should have recognized because he used to act exactly the same way when he was coming up. Asterisk, let's pause here and make a comparison. Asterisk, back in season 2, when Angela started getting too close to the truth, Ghost picked up on it immediately. He saw the signs, the way she asked certain questions, the shift in her tone, and within a few episodes, he had already changed his strategy. He adapted. He got ahead of the problem. Asterisk, then there's Dre. Remember how Ghost handled him? As soon as he smelled betrayal, he started moving the pieces. He didn't wait to see how it plays out. He went into survival mode. That's who Ghost was, not someone who hoped for the best, but someone who planned for the worst. Asterisk, so now we have to ask, why did that version of Ghost suddenly vanish the minute Tariq started showing signs of becoming dangerous? Asterisk, some fans say, well, Ghost just didn't want to believe his own son would hurt him. That's fair. Emotionally, but we've seen Ghost emotionally detach when it comes to survival. Remember what he did to Rala? He didn't want to kill him. They were like family, but the risk was too high. So he pulled the trigger anyway. Asterisk, Ghost didn't let emotions cloud his judgment. Not for long, anyway. That's what made him such a dangerous character. So again, why didn't he treat Tariq the same way? Asterisk, another excuse people uses. Ghost thought he still had control over Tariq. But here's the problem. The whole last season is proving the opposite. Tariq was openly challenging him, lying straight to his face, doing deals behind his back, even threatening him. And instead of tightening the leash, Ghost kept letting him get away with it. Asterisk, that's not control. That's denial. Asterisk, and denial is not something we've seen from Ghost before. Not in this way, asterisk, which brings us back to the writing. Asterisk, the writers needed Ghost to die. They wanted that poetic ending, father killed by the son. A sins of the father kind of ending. And to be fair, that could have worked. It could have been brilliant, but they skipped a step. They didn't build it properly. They didn't show Ghost really letting his guard down in a believable way. They didn't earn that blind spot. Asterisk, instead, they just wrote it in, as if Ghost forgot how to be Ghost for one episode. Asterisk, and that's what makes it a plot hole. Asterisk, it's not that he died. It's not even that he was betrayed. It's that the betrayal only worked because the character was written out of character. Asterisk, let's compare it to another show for a moment, Breaking Bad. When Walter White dies in the finale, it makes sense. Every step that led to it feels earned, every action, every mistake, every betrayal, it all fits into his arc. Nothing feels forced, asterisk, but with Ghost, it feels like the writers hit fast forward. They skipped the slow breakdown and went straight to the shocking ending, asterisk, and when you look back, it just doesn't add up. Asterisk, Ghost should have seen it coming. He should have picked up on Tariq's vibe. He should have left a contingency plan, something, anything. But instead, he just stood there vulnerable, exposed, and acting like nothing was wrong. Asterisk, that's not tragedy. Asterisk, that's a plot hole. Asterisk, because when a character's actions break the very rules that they themselves have lived by for 6 seasons, not because of growth, but because of convenience, you're not watching a natural ending. You're watching a story shortcut. Asterisk, and unfortunately, it took one of TV's smartest anti-heroes and made him look like a fool in his final hour. Asterisk, now that we've established the plot hole, the moment Ghost failed to recognize his son, Tariq, as a threat, let's explore why this happened. Was it just a writer's oversight? Or did they intentionally make Ghost act out of character for a deeper reason? Maybe it's a symbolic moment, or perhaps the writers wanted to create an emotional punch at the cost of character consistency. Let's break it down. Asterisk, the most straightforward explanation could be the simplest one. The writers just didn't think this through. It's not uncommon for shows to slip up, especially when they're trying to juggle multiple plot lines and character arcs in a final season. Ghost's death is supposed to be shocking, emotional, and tragic. And in some ways, it works. But in trying to deliver that twist, the writers may have sacrificed the consistency of Ghost's character. Asterisk, after 6 seasons of Ghost being a mastermind, it would be a huge leap for him to suddenly forget the lessons he learned over the course of the show. And that's exactly what happened. The writers may have been so focused on delivering a shocking conclusion that they overlooked one of the most important aspects of the show: Ghost's intellect and emotional awareness. Asterisk, it's possible they got caught up in the emotional pull of the father-son relationship, thinking it would land harder if Ghost didn't see the betrayal coming. But by doing so, they sacrificed the integrity of the character. And once that happens, the emotional punch loses some of its weight because it feels forced. Instead of tragedy, it feels like a convenient plot device. Asterisk, another possible explanation is that the writers deliberately chose to make Ghost's blind spot about Tariq a symbolic moment, a sign that Ghost, for all his genius, was slipping. By the time we get to the final season, Ghost is a man who's lived his life in the shadows. He's been consumed by the drug game, by lies, and by his need to go legit while still holding on to his criminal empire. The idea of losing control becomes central to his character's demise. Asterisk, what if this sudden failure to recognize Tariq as a threat wasn't a mistake at all, but rather a deliberate representation of Ghost's gradual fall from grace? Throughout the show, we've seen him outmaneuver everyone, but in his final season, the cracks begin to show. He's no longer the man who can read every situation and person around him. Ghost has become overconfident. He believes, to his core, that his past decisions, his ability to control his world, are enough to protect him. Asterisk, it's possible that the writers were trying to show that Ghost, in the end, was too comfortable with his own power. He thought that by being fatherly to Tariq, by assuming his son was just another troubled teen, he could maintain control. But in reality, this was the last sign of his unraveling. Ghost, the ultimate manipulator, finally lost his grip on his empire, his family, and his life. In that sense, it becomes a tragedy of hubris, asterisk, but while this interpretation could be fitting, it still doesn't explain the sheer lack of consistency in Ghost's behavior. If the idea was to show his slow decline, it could have been done better. Maybe they could have shown moments of vulnerability earlier in the season, or had him be more distracted by his personal life. Instead, he's the same Ghost he's always been, right up until the point he completely misses the danger in his own son. Asterisk, there's another possibility. that the writers intentionally made Ghost appear weak and flawed in his final moments. To highlight the show's core theme, no one, not even Ghost, is invincible. For 6 seasons, Ghost had been the ultimate strategist. He was the puppet master pulling all the strings, the man who always had the upper hand, and the one person you couldn't underestimate. But what if, in the end, the writers wanted to strip away that illusion? They wanted us to see that no matter how powerful Ghost was, he was still just a man. And like any man, he had his weaknesses. His overconfidence, his belief that he could control everything, made him blind to the one thing he should have feared the most, his son. In this sense, Tariq's betrayal becomes more than just a plot twist. It becomes a metaphor for the destructive nature of the choices Ghost made throughout his life. By making Ghost underestimate Tariq, the writers are forcing us to see that even the strongest, most calculated people can make mistakes. They can become victims of their own blind spots, their own pride, and their own arrogance. But again, the execution of this idea feels a bit rushed. We never really see Ghost's gradual decline or signs that he's losing his edge. Instead, it happens in one episode, and that's where it feels like the plot was bent to fit a theme, rather than a logical character progression. Here's a wild theory that's been floating around. What if Ghost didn't miss the danger entirely? What if he knew Tariq was a threat, but he was deliberately trying to protect him by not confronting him directly? This theory suggests that Ghost, despite all his scheming and manipulation, was still trying to protect his son from the life he didn't want to believe that Tariq could turn against him because, deep down, he still saw the boy as the last piece of his legacy. Ghost might have felt that if he pushed Tariq too hard, forced him to face the reality of his actions, or confronted him with the consequences, it would push his son too far. And in the end, that push might have been what caused Tariq to kill him. This theory paints Ghost as a tragic figure, someone who couldn't help but protect his family, even if it meant his own downfall. If this was the writer's intent, it would make for a heartbreaking moment. But the problem is, the show doesn't give us enough to support this theory. Ghost's actions don't suggest he's trying to protect Tariq. Instead, it feels more like he's been written into a corner where the only way for the plot to move forward is to have him act recklessly. So, what does it all mean? Was Ghost's failure to see Tariq's betrayal a mistake by the writers? Was it a deliberate choice to show his decline? Or was it part of a larger commentary about the dangers of overconfidence? The truth is, it's probably a mix of all these things. The writers likely didn't put enough thought into the character, consistency required for Ghost's arc, and as a result, we got a plot twist that felt more convenient than earned. But they may have also intended for Ghost's blind spot to represent his fall from grace, a man who, for all his intelligence, lost control of the one thing that mattered most. Regardless of the explanation, the reality is that this plot whole damaged Ghost's character and left fans questioning everything they knew about him. And that's why, even though it was emotionally powerful, it didn't land the way it should have. It's easy to brush off a single plot hole in a long-running show. Every series has them, from the greats like Breaking Bad to massive franchises like Game of Thrones. But when a plot hole cracks the foundation of a main character, it doesn't just affect one episode. It changes how we see the entire story. And that's exactly what happens with Ghost. Let's break it down. For 6 seasons, we were sold a very specific idea that Ghost was smarter than everyone around him. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the most violent, but he was the most calculated. That was the point. His survival wasn't based on luck. It was based on skill, logic, foresight, planning. That's what made the show addictive. We watched him weave through impossible situations, always wondering how he'd escape. So when Power built its story around Ghost being a mastermind, the audience bought in. But this one moment, Ghost not seeing Tariq's betrayal, makes you question all of that. Asterisk, it's not just about the shock. It's not just about the emotional impact. It changes how we view Ghost's intelligence. Suddenly, all those careful decisions from earlier seasons feel a little less impressive. If this is how his story ends, blindsided by a teenager who gave off every warning sign, it makes you wonder, was Ghost really that smart, or was he just lucky? Asterisk, that's the ripple effect. Asterisk, because when a story breaks the internal logic of its characters, it breaks the audience's trust. Asterisk, we're not talking about a small error. We're talking about a final, defining moment in the show. A moment that's supposed to wrap up Ghost's arc and give him a fitting end. And instead of showing him go out like the cold, calculating strategist we knew, he goes out completely off guard, unaware, exposed, and wrong about the one person who mattered most. Asterisk, it's not just a plot hole, it's character damage. Asterisk, and that matters because Power spent years making us believe that Ghost had grown from the streets, that he'd outlasted his enemies because he had discipline. He didn't move off emotion. He didn't leave loose ends. And more importantly, he never, ever got caught slipping. Asterisk, until now. Asterisk, and this wasn't slipping. This was a full-on fall. Asterisk, it affects how we see his entire relationship with Tariq. Looking back, every father-son scene starts to feel fake. Like Ghost was never paying attention. It affects how we remember the final season. Instead of watching a master player finish his game of chess, we watched a man walk into checkmate with his eyes closed. That's not just tragic, that's frustrating. Asterisk, even worse, it affects how we see Tariq's journey too. Asterisk, because let's be honest, Power Book 2 is built on the weight of what happened at the end of Power. If Ghost had truly seen Tariq as a threat and still chose not to act, that would give Book 2 more depth. Tariq's story would carry more guilt, more layers. But since Ghost never even acknowledged the danger, it leaves that father-son conflict feeling unfinished. Unanswered. Asterisk, instead of Ghost saying, I know what you're becoming, and I still love you, we get nothing, just a slow walk toward his death, thinking he still had control, until the very last second. Asterisk, and when a character's final moment doesn't reflect their entire journey, it weakens everything that came before. Asterisk, let's compare this to another iconic anti-hero, Tony Soprano. We don't see his death, but the tension, the paranoia, the possibility, it fits his character. Walter White in Breaking Bad. His final act is pure Walter, a mix of ego, redemption, and control. Even Tommy Shelby in Peaky Blinders ends his series with a strategic move that's 100% in character. Asterisk, but Ghost. Asterisk, he gets taken out because he underestimated a threat he should have seen coming a mile away. Asterisk, and that's why fans still talk about this moment today. Not because it was bold, but because it didn't feel honest. Asterisk, now, could the writers have made it work? Absolutely. Asterisk, they could have shown Ghost slowly losing touch, slipping, becoming overconfident. Maybe distracted by his political campaign. Maybe worn down by betrayal after betrayal. They could have built in scenes that showed Ghost purposely choosing to ignore the signs because deep down he didn't want to believe his son had become him. If they had done that, this moment would have been unforgettable. Asterisk, but they didn't. Asterisk, instead, they rushed it. They skipped the build-up, and the result is a death that feels more like a setup than a payoff. Asterisk, so where does that leave us? Asterisk, with a show that was brilliant in many ways, complex characters, strong acting, incredible tension, but one that dropped the ball right when it mattered most. Asterisk, Ghost's death could have been the final, perfect chapter in the story of a man who spent his life trying to escape who he was. Instead, it became the biggest plot hole in Power, not because it wasn't emotional, but because it wasn't earned. Asterisk.